I took the night shift at the County Records Archive because I thought it would be boring in the comforting way. Fluorescent lights, the soft hum of an ancient HVAC, paper dust that smells like old rain. My days had gotten loud and scrambled, and I pictured myself as a lighthouse keeper for files. A steady person with a keyring, a thermos, and a good audiobook. The building sits 4 blocks off the river in a stretch of town that used to matter and now mostly holds its breath. Red brick, slate roof, stone lintels carved with dates, no one looks up anymore. There's a brass plaque by the door with a motto: "What is kept safe." I believed it the first time I turned the key. The orientation lasted 9 minutes. Edith from HR spoke as if the syllables had been measured. You scan intake forms, shelve deliveries, sign the night log every hour, and do not use the south elevator after midnight. A pause. You will hear the dumbwaiter. You do not open it unless you requested a reel. I almost laughed at reel, like I'd been hired by a museum in 1975. Edith didn't laugh. She pushed a cart at me loaded with cardboard boxes, each tied with red cotton tape. The ends were finished in tiny sailor's knots. "The knots must come back as knots," she said, and passed me a single brass key that was warm from her hand. I liked the job in the way you like a rhythm. The fluorescent lights had a tone, E flat, that I began to hum with under my breath without noticing. The big metal clock ticked with an intention that made time feel like somebody's chore, rather than something that happened to us. The archives are deeper than they look from the outside. Stacks open into stacks the way a dream opens into another dream, first on paper, then in your legs. Row after row of shelves that go from hip height to 12 feet tall. File cabinets with drawers that only a particular gesture opens. 2 fingers on the label, 1 on the lower edge, a small pull as if you're coaxing a shy animal. There are rules, not just the ones Edith said out loud. You pick them up like you pick up the rhythm of a household you move into. Leave the chain on the door because the wind is opinionated. Jiggle the toilet handle twice. Don't set wet cups on the oak. The archive's first rule I learned on my second night. At 1:13 a.m., a tin bell rang somewhere behind me. The kind of bell that should be tied to a shop door. I followed the sound and found the dumbwaiter tucked into a wall between stacks H and J. Its little metal door scuffed and the paint around it thumbed shiny by years of use. A reel of microfilm sat inside. Grey, spooled tight, labelled in a careful hand. I hadn't requested anything. The label said, "Elevator Incidents, South Bank, 1952 to 1963. The handwriting was my grandfather's. I stood there with my hand on the cold metal of the dumbwaiter and felt, for the first time in years, like I was being watched by a room. I knew the rule before anyone said it to me. Don't take what you didn't ask for. I slid the reel back and shut the door gently. The bell did not ring again that night. On the third night, the south elevator opened on its own, just enough to make a seam of black down the middle of the stainless steel. My reflection split in two. The clock said 12:02. The fluorescent lights made a small sound like a sigh. The clipboard with the hourly log felt very heavy in my hand. I took one step closer, as if you can hear darkness better if you tilt your head. The elevator's interior smelled like cold pennies and old wet wool. I reached for the call button and stopped. Edith's voice in my head. Do not use the south elevator after midnight. It didn't say, don't speak to it. I said, I see you. The doors slid shut as if they had been waiting for a cue. You get used to small oddities if you're alone long enough. The heating system thumps like a careful person coming upstairs. A draft learns your name and puts it in the edges of doors. Paper remembers hands. I shelved boxes with my little brass key and my thermos within reach. I learned each shelf's gravity. Some took the weight of a box like a promise. Some flinched. I learned the smell of time. Some boxes are softer dust, some sourer, as if a room had been sealed with a fight still inside. At 3:17 one morning, a woman spoke right behind me. Please don't retie that. Her voice wasn't dramatic. It was tired. Ordinary in the way, tired as ordinary. I turned and saw no one. My fingers were in the red cotton tape, and I had done half the knot without thinking. The tape ran warm across my skin. I set it down and looked over my shoulder at the aisle. Empty shelves, sensible labels, my cart parked with two wheels turned outward the way you do with a stroller when you're about to keep going. I said, "Okay," to the room and left the knot as a soft loop. On the break room table the next night, someone had left a note under the sugar jar. Nothing takes kindness worse than a knot in the wrong place. It wasn't in Edith's careful hand. The paper had been torn from a ledger, faint lines and numbers ghosting through from the other side. I made my coffee too sweet and drank it anyway. I stopped retying any knot that wasn't mine, even if it looked sloppy. After a week of that, the bells and the dumbwaiter stopped altogether, and for 2 nights, I slept well. People don't think about county archives unless they need them. When they come, they arrive with a story in their face and a deadline in their elbow. They bring birth certificates, deeds, marriage licenses, proof that a person was a person in a place. Some nights, a clerk from City Hall would drop off a stack of transfers, or an elderly man would sign out the war maps to run his finger along roads he once drove in convoy. We are not a haunted house, I told myself, just a place where old things keep each other company. Then the reels started coming anyway. The first one asked politely. The dumbwaiter bell chimed once, and there it was. Elevator incidents. South Bank. 1952 to 1963. My grandfather's handwriting again. And underneath, in a paler pencil that made the graphite look like it was ashamed to be on the page, my name. I stood there until my eyes watered from not blinking and then slid the reel back. The second reel said, House on Gannon, 1974. Evac order, children. The third had no label at all, just a red cotton string tied around it with the tiniest, tidiest knot, and a smear of something that might have been oil or might have been old rain. I kept sliding them back. The dumbwaiter bell kept ringing, patient as a metronome. You should know my grandfather died in the south elevator. The newspaper called it an accident because there wasn't a better word. He worked his whole life repairing things that other people wore out. Gears, pulleys, the way a door sat in its frame, the relationship between gravity and trust. He was 67 the morning the cable sheared. He was carrying a tool bag and a sandwich. The elevator fell 2 floors and stopped by the grace of a secondary brake that held like a saint. The brake didn't hold long enough. When I was a kid, my mother would touch the elevator button with 2 fingers and then wipe them on her jeans as if the button had been dirty. Machines do what they're asked, she would say, and sometimes they're asked by weather. I tell you that so you'll forgive me for what I did next, which is the thing you are yelling at the story not to do. On a Tuesday, leaning toward Wednesday, when the building had settled into its particular late-night exhale, the south elevator opened at 12:01 and did not close. The dumbwaiter bell chimed. A reel slid into the little box, labelled in my grandfather's hand. I took the reel. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed with a little courtesy cough. I pressed B for basement. The button did not light. The elevator began to move anyway, not down, not up, but as if it had turned sideways and decided the building was a hallway. I put my palm on the cool bar and felt the motor say something complicated to the cable. The fluorescent light inside hummed E-flat. I could see, in the stainless steel of the doors, my reflection split into a person who had made a mistake, and a person who would soon pretend she hadn't. When the doors opened, it wasn't the basement. It was a floor the building does not have. The ceiling was 3 inches higher. The paint was the wrong white. The corridor breathed like a sleeping thing. And at the end of the hall, a door with the brass number 12 on it leaned open as if listening. My grandfather stood beside the door with his hands on the head of his cane, exactly as if the world had only rotated us to face each other again. He'd been gone long enough that my first thought was not grief, but recognition, the way you feel when you see your car from a distance and think, There I am. "Don't make knots you don't mean," he said. No hello, no small talk. His cardigan looked like rain had once asked it a favor. "I didn't," I said. I stopped. "I know." His eyes were the same soft blue as the center of a flame. He angled his chin at the reel in my hand. "You took that, though." "You wrote my name on one," I said, more defensive than I meant. "You started." He smiled in that way older people do when a younger person uses the word started as if it has meaning. "You took a night shift," he said, "because you wanted a job that matched the inside of your head." He tapped the cane once. "And because you thought you could keep people safe if you kept their papers tidy." A pause. "You can't fix the past by alphabetizing it." I held up the reel. "Then what is this?" "A witness," he said. "Not for you. For the building." We went into room 12, which was not a room at all, but a little theatre. A bench, a projector, a smell of celluloid like green apples, and old shirts. He threaded the reel with the soft half-swears of a person who spent years turning stubborn things the way they want to be turned. The film coughed once, and then caught. It was not the elevator. It was a street I knew, a summer I did not. Children ran through a sprinkler that made the air beaded and merciful. A dog put his whole face in a bucket and came up graceless and happy. My mother, small enough to still be carried, clapped her hands like sound would be impressed by her and make more of itself. I watched people I love move the way water does when it forgets it's supposed to be quiet. My grandfather didn't watch the screen. He watched me. "And," he said, when the film flapped, bright, and the machine ticked itself empty. "It's beautiful," I said. My voice startled something in my chest that had been standing too still. "It's true," he said. "That's why it's dangerous." He rethreaded the reel backward, and the children walked back out of the sprinkler and dried themselves into what people who are not children become. The dog got his face out of the bucket and dignity back. My mother stepped backward out of my father's shadow, and the two of them turned into silhouettes with summer in them. When the film ended again, he let the tail slap softly in the air. "The building keeps the kinds of truth that lift their chin when you look at them," he said. "The kinds that either discipline you or feed you. It doesn't keep lies well. They go sour in the drawers. They stink up the aisles." He tapped the cane against the bench. "It was angry at you for the knots, but it forgave you. It won't forgive the elevator." He turned his head then, the way people do when they listen for a downstairs door. "We have to go," he said. "You've been here too long for a person who is still supposed to go home." On the way back down the hall, he stopped and put his palm on the paint. "You hear me?" he said, not to me. "She's not yours." The wall made a sound like a swallowed word. The elevator opened. We got in. The car did its sideways trick again, but I could feel it fighting for definition the way a person fights sleep at a meeting. The doors opened to fluorescent E-flat, the regular white paint, the south bank where the clipboard waited with its log like a polite accusation. "Why did it keep you?" I asked. "I meant the building. I meant the elevator. I meant the past." My grandfather shrugged in a way that said he'd already had this argument with himself, and it had turned into a story. "I walked alone," he said, simple as that. "I worked along edges." I listened to the noises no one else wanted. The building thought I was the kind of person that could be useful here. Maybe it was right. Maybe it wasn't. It doesn't matter. I've had my time. His eyes were the color the river gets when it decides the sky is none of its business. "You still have yours." The doors began to close, and I stepped forward without thinking, the way you put your hand out when a friend stands to leave before you've finished what you meant to say. The brass edge kissed my wrist and left a clean, cold line. He shook his head. "Walk kindly," he said, "and don't carry reels that aren't yours." The doors closed. The elevator did not open again that night. After that, the building behaved for a while, the way a dog behaves when it is deciding whether to go back to a bad habit. I signed the log at the top of each hour. I drank coffee too late and slept too early. I left the dumbwaiter alone. The bells chimed sometimes for other clerks, not for me. I could hear them in the stacks, far away, the way you hear a bell tower from 3 neighborhoods over. I was almost happy in the way you can be happy in a room where things wait for you but don't ask. Then a box arrived with no label. It was not on any manifest. The tape around it wasn't the county's red cotton, but something white and slicker, a plastic twine that cut if you pulled it wrong. I knew enough to leave it in intake and sign the log with a note for day shift. Unlabeled delivery, please advise. I put the pen down and the box moved. Not much, just a small, still correction, as if it had remembered what shape a corner should be. I carried it to my desk because of course I did. The white twine was tied not with a knot, but with a little crocheted loop, delicate, grandmother fast. I undid it and laid the twine in a polite circle. The cardboard opened like a breath let out. Inside were photographs wrapped in tissue. The tissue smelled like a drawer that had been closed in a hurry. The photographs were black and white, glossy in the way old gloss goes matte. The first 3 were of buildings: the courthouse before the renovation, the mill before the river tired of working, a row of houses before someone put a highway between them and their groceries. The 4th was of the south elevator doors with a man's reflection split by the seam. Not my grandfather, me. I put the photo down and my hand shook. The 5th was the dumbwaiter with a reel half in, half out, like a tongue. The label on the reel said, Elevator Incidents, South Bank, 1952 to 1963, and underneath my name, but not in my grandfather's hand, in mine. I wanted to be angry, and instead I was tired in that way that makes you gentle out of self-preservation. I stacked the photos, set them back in the cardboard, looped the white twine the way it had been looped before, and wrote on the top of the box in exactly the careful hand the building respects. Returned unopened. Not requested. I took the box to the south elevator and set it in front of the doors like an offering or a boundary, I couldn't tell which. The elevator opened at 11:59, which is not after midnight, which is the sort of argument a building makes when it thinks it can win on a technicality. I did not get in. I slid the box over the seam until half of it was inside and half out, like a demonstration. The elevator took it without ceremony. The doors closed. I stood there with my palms out, empty, in the universal posture of someone who has handed back the thing that kept trying to matter. This is the part where you think the story keeps climbing until it drops you. It doesn't. The archive is a place that knows about middles. There are boxes in there whose first page is all that's left, and boxes whose last page survived a flood. And we keep both and call it complete enough. I kept working. The bells came sometimes, and I said no. The reels arrived sometimes in neat stacks during the day with covers stamped properly, and I threaded them for the people who asked. People cried at tables over thin paper. A woman laughed once so tenderly at her great-grandfather's draft card that I had to go into the stacks and hold the end of a shelf until I remembered how to breathe again. A month later, on a morning that had the exact color of a nickel, a note appeared on the break room table under the sugar jar. Thank you, in a hand that wasn't Edith's or mine. I made my coffee less sweet and found I liked it better that way. When I went back to the desk, a red cotton ribbon lay where my clipboard should have been. No knot, just both ends waiting. I tied the simplest one I know, the one my grandfather taught me on a porch when my feet could still swing while I sat, and set it in the drawer. The dumbwaiter bell rang once in what I swear was approval. I rang it back with the little brass service bell by the intake window, which is the kind of joke you can only make with a building that has decided not to eat you. If there's a moral, it's small. There's no grand haunting, no discovery of a crime, no secret inheritance. Just this. Some places have a mouth. Some places add you to their collection by asking for your help until you forget where you were going when you first came in. The trick, and it barely deserves the name, is to listen early, answer gently, and refuse what isn't yours. Walk kindly. Retie what you untie. Get in elevators only when you need to go someplace they can actually take you. Most nights, on my 2 a.m. rounds, I pause by the south bank and say goodnight to the doors. A polite superstition. Once, in the brushed steel, I saw two shadows where one should have been. Mine, and a cardigan suggestion. I didn't turn around because you don't turn around for shadows. You say their names. I'm okay, I said to both of us. The fluorescent hummed its small E-flat affirmation. The clock ticked a measurable mercy. Somewhere in the stacks, a box settled, content to be in the middle of what it knows. That's tonight's first long tale. If you'd like another continuous nosleep story in this same calm, drifting style, tell me to roll into part 2, and I'll keep the night shift going. Hey friends, welcome back to SpiderFish, your quiet corner of the internet where the worlds we build stay steady and the stories wander a little into the strange. Tonight, we're doing r/nosleep, a slow walk into the dark in a calm voice you can let play in the background. Settle in. Story 2, The Library's Hidden Basement. I was the kind of kid who loved the library. When other kids begged for the mall or the movies, I wanted the smell of dust and ink, the weight of silence like a blanket. By the time I was 15, the librarians all knew me by name, and I had a spot. Second floor, west wing, corner by the window where you could see the sycamore outside. That's why it was strange that I'd never noticed the basement. It wasn't listed on the directory. The staircase down was tucked behind a shelf labeled Atlases, half hidden, as if someone wanted you to overlook it. And for years, I did. Until one evening, when the library was nearly empty, I dropped a pencil and it rolled under the bottom shelf. I crouched to grab it and saw the stairwell yawning in the shadows. A plain wooden door waited at the bottom. On it was a brass plaque, tarnished and dull. I wiped away the dust. It said, "Special Collections." Curiosity is its own kind of gravity. I couldn't stop myself from going down. The door wasn't locked. The hinges creaked like they hadn't moved in decades. Inside, it was colder. The air carried a sharp tang, like wet stone or iron. A few dim bulbs buzzed in cages overhead, throwing pale light on endless shelves. Unlike the upstairs, these shelves weren't neat. They were crammed with odd-sized boxes, binders, scrolls, and books bound in leather that looked older than the town itself. A small desk sat in the middle of the room. On it, a guest log lay open, fountain pen resting on the spine. Names filled the pages, written in neat script. Each entry had 2 dates beside it, one when the person entered and one when they left. Except the last entry only had the first date. I ran my hand along the spines. None of them had titles I recognized. One was stamped with only a year, 1871. Another said, "The Boy Beneath the Floorboards." Another, "Do not read aloud." I pulled that one half out before shoving it back, heart thudding. At the far end of the room, a single display case gleamed under its own little bulb. Inside was a thin volume bound in cracked blue leather. A sign read, "Local Histories, Restricted." I shouldn't have opened the case, but I did. The book wasn't filled with words, not really. Each page held a drawing, charcoal sketches of faces, ordinary people. Their eyes were detailed, far too detailed. As I flipped through, I froze. On page 17 was my face. Drawn perfectly, every line, every shadow, even the freckle on my jaw. But it wasn't me as I was. It was me, older, 30, maybe 35, eyes hollow, mouth tight. I slammed the book shut and shoved it back into the case. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. An old man stood at the desk. I hadn't heard the door open. His suit was outdated, black and fraying at the cuffs. His skin was the color of parchment. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice was calm, almost kind. I didn't mean to," I stammered. He nodded once. Nobody ever does. That's how the basement works. He closed the guest log gently. "Come back when it's time. Until then, forget you saw this place." I backed away, up the stairs, not daring to look over my shoulder. I tried to forget. I really did. But 2 months later, I dreamed of the blue book, of page 17. And when I woke, I felt older, tired in my bones. So I went back. The door opened just as easily. The shelves looked the same, but the guest log was gone, the desk empty, and the display case unlocked. The blue book waited for me. This time, I opened it to the last page. My face again, older still. 50, maybe 60. Hair grey, eyes sunken. A date written under the sketch. Not today's, not tomorrow's, but soon. I don't go to that library anymore, but sometimes, in other places, coffee shops, train stations, the grocery store, I think I see the old man, watching, waiting. And when I catch my reflection in a window, I swear the face looking back is a little closer to the one in that book. That was our second story of the night. Long, eerie, the kind that doesn't shout at you but lingers, waiting at the edges of your thoughts like a library basement you didn't know existed. Part 3. The Motel on Route 9. I'd been on the road for hours before the rain started. Not a summer sprinkle or a passing thunderstorm, but the kind of rain that looks like it was waiting for you, the kind that sets in with intent. By the time I hit Route 9, the world had gone blurry. The white lines on the asphalt dissolved, headlights smeared into streaks, and every mile felt borrowed. My phone had lost signal about 40 minutes earlier. The GPS map froze somewhere near a town with a name I didn't recognize. Gas was low enough to make the gauge needle twitch. My hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles pale, my eyes squinting against the endless grey. That's when I saw the neon. It wasn't bright, not the crisp buzz of a new sign, but a tired glow, pink-red letters half drowned in static rain. A beacon in the storm. Motel 9, it said. No vacancy sign, no slogan, just the word and the number, flickering, as if it was forgetting how to spell itself. I pulled in. The parking lot stretched in a straight row. 8, maybe 10 doors under a sagging roof, paint peeling into beige flakes. A vending machine hummed at the end like it was the only thing awake. The rain slackened the moment I turned off the engine, though the pavement still glistened as if it had never been dry. The office smelled faintly of oranges and something older. Dust, maybe, or the inside of a suitcase left too long in an attic. A bell sat on the counter. Before I could touch it, it chimed once, clear as a coin drop. The clerk appeared through the curtain. He was thin, almost folded into himself, with hair slicked flat against his skull and skin that had seen too much sun and not enough rest. His shirt was the kind of white that only comes from being washed 100 times, every thread tired. He smiled, polite but strained, like someone doing a job they never applied for. "One night?" he asked. I nodded. My voice felt swallowed by the quiet. He slid a key forward. Brass tag, scratched and worn. Room 6. The number had been carved deep, almost angrily, as if it had needed to stay put. I reached for my wallet. He waved a hand, then hesitated, then let me pay. Cash only. No receipt, no computer anywhere in sight, just the drawer that clicked shut like it had teeth. The rain had stopped entirely when I stepped back outside. The air smelled wet, but the parking lot was bone dry. The room looked ordinary. Floral bedspread, faded until the flowers were only suggestions. Lamp with a crooked shade. Carpet stiff from years of detergent. A dresser with a mirror above it. And that was the first thing I noticed. The mirror didn't face the bed. It angled toward the window instead, as if it wanted to keep an eye on the road, not me. I pulled the curtains shut. The mirror fogged. Not like a bathroom mirror after a shower. Not the even haze of steam. This fog crept inward from the edges, deliberate, like a hand drawing lace patterns across the glass. Shapes wavered. A man on the bed, a woman at the dresser. Their faces indistinct, but their presence certain. Neither of them were me. I wiped the glass clean with my sleeve. The reflection snapped back to normal. Just me, pale under the yellow lamp. I told myself I was tired. Driving too long does things to your eyes. But when I lay down, the rain began again. Harder now, drumming on the roof with a rhythm that sounded almost like words. I left the TV on for company. Static on channel 3 whispered in the corner, the kind of hiss that almost sounds like breathing. Around 2 a.m., someone knocked. Not on my door, on the mirror. 3 sharp taps, from the inside. I froze. My pulse thudded in my throat. I told myself it was the pipes, the building settling, anything but what it sounded like. I kept my eyes on the ceiling. When I finally looked, words had bloomed in the fog. Check out. The letters dripped downward, streaking like tears. I didn't sleep. I watched the window curtains, the edge of the dresser, the shadow under the bathroom door. The mirror stayed quiet, though sometimes I swore the fog pulsed like a slow breath. At dawn, I left the key on the nightstand. No way was I carrying it back to the office. The parking lot was still dry. The air smelled wrong, metallic, like pennies and old water. The clerk was standing outside the office, hands folded neatly. He nodded once when he saw me, as if I'd passed some unspoken test. "Not everyone leaves in time," he said. I drove away without answering. That should have been the end of it. But the road stretched longer than it should have. I drove for nearly 2 hours, and every sign I passed said Route 9. Every bend in the highway looked the same. Trees heavy with rain, guardrails dented in the same places, billboards peeling into the same slogans. When I finally pulled into a gas station, the receipt printer spat out my total, and under the numbers, faint grey ink spelled out, "Room 6, return key." I hadn't taken it. I didn't go back. I told myself I wouldn't. But weeks later, I was on another trip, another highway. Different state, different weather. I stopped at a roadside motel, not the same name, not the same sign, but the mirror in the room angled the same way. Toward the window, toward the road. And in the fog, when I closed the curtains, I saw a shape, waiting. The rest of the night unspooled like a slow fever dream. I dreamed of hallways lined with doors, each marked with numbers that repeated, 6, 6, 6, not stacked like a pattern, but scattered, as if the motel couldn't decide how many rooms it had. In every hallway, mirrors angled outward, all of them breathing, fog blooming from the corners like veins. I woke with the taste of copper on my tongue. The receipt from the front desk had no writing, but the brass key was in my pocket. Same number, same scratches. Room 6. I haven't checked into a motel since. But sometimes, at gas stations or rest stops, I catch the smell of oranges. Sometimes the receipt printer stutters, and I see grey ink that fades before I can show anyone. And once, when I stopped at a diner off the interstate, the waitress set my coffee down and slid a folded napkin toward me. On it, in blocky letters, was a single phrase. "Don't be late for checkout." I think Route 9 isn't a road. I think it's a loop. A place that finds you when you're too tired, too lost, too ready to hand yourself over. The motel is just its mouth. The clerk is its voice. The mirrors are its eyes. If you ever see that neon sign flickering through the rain, keep driving. Even if your tank is low. Even if your phone is dead. Because once you hold the key, you never really give it back. And if you've already stayed, then you know what I mean when I say the rain doesn't fall everywhere. Some places are dry when they shouldn't be. Some places wait for you. And when the mirror fogs and the letters appear, you'll know it's not advice. It's a countdown. Check out. Part 4, the rest stop at mile marker 47. I've always thought highways were their own kind of dream. Hours blur into white lines, radio static, coffee from gas stations that all taste the same. But dreams have seams, and sometimes you feel them split. It was after midnight when I saw the sign, "Rest Area, 1 mile." I was the only car on the road. My dashboard clock glowed 12:17. My eyes ached. The cup of gas station coffee on the seat beside me had gone cold. So when I saw the row of lamps ahead, pale yellow in the dark, I pulled in. The lot stretched long and empty. No semis, no other cars. Just a scattering of tall lamps that buzzed faintly, their light pooling on cracked asphalt. The building itself was small, square, utilitarian. Cinder block walls painted beige, a vending machine humming near the door. A green sign by the entrance said, "Welcome to mile marker 47. Rest stop. Open 24 hours." Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach and something sweeter underneath. Not flowers, something like syrup left too long. I used the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and then sat at one of the plastic tables in the lobby. A rack of tourist brochures leaned in the corner. Caves, diners, attractions that all seemed to be 20 miles away in every direction. The clock on the wall ticked, loud enough to feel deliberate. 12:23. That's when I noticed the guest log. It sat open on the counter, just like in a motel. A neat ledger book, each page lined, dates and names scrawled in ballpoint pen. The last entry was tonight's date. My name. I hadn't signed it, I should have left right then. But exhaustion is its own leash. I convinced myself someone was playing a trick. Maybe the attendant wrote it down when I walked in. I looked around. No one at the counter. No one in the halls. The place felt abandoned, but it was too clean for that. When I glanced back at the log, another line had appeared. The same date, the same name. But the time column was blank. It waited. I left the lobby and walked the length of the building. Empty. Every door unlocked. A family area with a children's play corner sat quiet. Toys stacked neatly. The vending machines hummed, their displays flickering. But when I pressed the buttons, nothing dispensed. In the hallway near the bathrooms, a bulletin board hung crooked. Flyers sagged under pushpins, edges yellowed. One flyer caught my eye. Missing. Last seen at mile marker 47. No photo. Just the words. Pinned beneath it, another identical flyer. Then another. Dozens, layered on top of each other until the board was thick with them. When I returned to the lobby, the log was closed. The clock on the wall ticked 12:31, and the vending machine light flickered out. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the lamps outside. Then, soft, deliberate, the scrape of a chair. At the farthest table, one of the plastic chairs had pulled itself an inch away from the table, as if someone invisible had just sat down. I left. The highway was darker than before. My headlights carved 2 thin tunnels through the night. Every sign I passed read the same. Rest area. 1 mile. Every time I pulled off, it was the same lot, the same building, the same green sign. Mile marker, 47. The clock on my dashboard never moved past 12:47. When I finally forced myself to park and cut the engine, the silence pressed in. I don't know how long I sat there, hands gripping the wheel, watching the building under its buzzing lamps. Eventually, I stepped out. The lobby lights glowed. The logbook waited on the counter, open to a fresh page. My name was already there. This time, the time column wasn't blank. It read 12:47, final. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember the drive that came after. All I know is that when the sun rose, I was 3 towns away, parked at a diner, coffee warm in my hands. My phone buzzed with signal again. But the gas station receipt in my pocket didn't list food. It listed only one item. Mile marker 47, stay complete. And under it, in faint grey ink, next visit, TBD. That's tonight's next long tale. The rest stop that exists outside the clock, the place you only reach when you're too tired to keep driving. Part 5, the laundromat on Alder Street. I don't know when my sleep schedule slipped sideways, only that one night I looked up and it was 2:13 a.m. and I was wide awake with a basket of damp laundry and a dryer in my apartment that had started to thump like a heartbeat. The super said he'd look at it on Tuesday. which is the kind of day that keeps moving farther down the week the more you ask. I told myself a late-night laundromat would be boring in a way that would make me drowsy. Coins, the spin of a drum like rain you can see. Alder Street runs the length of the neighborhood and pretends it's important. It has a bakery that closes early, a bar that stays open late, a storefront church with folding chairs and a hand-painted sign, and, halfway down the block, a laundromat whose neon says Spin City, even though the business license taped to the door says Alder Wash and Dry. I parked in front of the dark tailor shop next door and carried my basket in. The bell over the door was the old kind, a little brass dome that rang like a spoon on a thin glass. The laundromat had the kind of lighting that forgives nobody and nothing. Bright, humming, a little too blue. Rows of front loaders with scuffed portholes on the left. Dryers stacked too high on the right. A Coke machine with a button for tab that I'm pretty sure hasn't existed since I was a kid. A corkboard at the back held curled flyers for guitar lessons and lost cats that probably found other houses by now. A lone plant near the window tried to be brave about fluorescent light. No one at the counter. No one anywhere. Just the steady, soft sound of one machine turning, as if someone had set a cycle and stepped out for air and forgot to come back. There are rules at every laundromat. You figure them out by watching people who've been there before. Use the scoops they leave in the detergent box. Don't leave the door open with water in it. If a machine is out of order, pretend you never saw it eat a stranger's quarters. Alder Wash and Dry had rules printed on laminated paper above the coin changer. Last wash 2 a.m. Please do not open doors mid-cycle. If you drop a sock, pick it up. Floors are not baskets. In case of jammed coin slot, do not insert additional coins. Do not use machine 7B. The font for that last one was newer and darker, like someone had reprinted the whole rule sheet just to say it louder. I loaded a washer that wasn't 7B and measured the detergent the way I always do, too generous, as if soap could solve more than it can. When I pressed the button, the machine accepted it with a soft, grateful gulp. Water hissed in. The drum sighed into motion. The satisfaction of it made my shoulders drop. I slid onto a plastic chair by the window and checked my phone out of habit and found no new messages, which was somehow comforting and not. The bell over the door rang. Nobody came in. It does that sometimes, I told myself. Drafts, old springs, a building that remembers a busier hour and makes the sound on behalf of a person who didn't show. I opened the book I'd brought and read the same sentence 5 times without understanding it. The washer hit its rhythm, low and steady, a sound with a body. The hum of the lights joined in. I watched soap suds ghost against the glass and try to become shapes, the way clouds do when you really want them to. The second cycle of the night was not mine. It started 3 machines down with a clank, a pause, and then a churn. The glass in that door was clouded from hard water and time. Every laundromat has a machine that looks like it was welded by a person with a grudge. This was that one. I counted washers between mine and the bad one. 7. When I looked up at the labels, I realized my machine was 5A. The ugly, too loud one was 7A. And directly above it in the stacked column, dark and still, with a magnet strip across its coin slot that read, out of order in red letters, was 7B. The magnet strip looked new, the kind they sell by the roll at the hardware store. The out of order card looked older, laminated in the brittle way that says somebody cares enough to protect the paper, but not enough to update the wording when the phone number at the bottom changed. I don't know why I felt compelled to stand and go read the number. Maybe because there's a kind of small curiosity that feels like politeness. Call Jim, 5550198. I touched the plasticky corner of the card. The laminate had bubbled at the edge over something trapped beneath. A drop of water, a hair, number. A tiny scrap of receipt paper with a date punched through as if by a broken stapler. I thought of all the things that live inside a laundromat. Socks and lint and quarters and time. My machine knocked softly, as if embarrassed to ask for attention. It had finished the wash and lit up END in polite green letters. I transferred damp clothes to a dryer that did not belong to row 7 at all. When I scooped the last of the laundry from the washer drum, my fingers touched something that wasn't mine. It was a note, folded into quarters so precisely it felt like the person had measured each edge with a ruler. The paper had the shiny feel of receipt stock. I waited for the common sense part of my brain to say, "Leave it." But common sense had stepped out for air. I unfolded it and read, in the kind of penmanship you learn in school when someone cared about loops and lines. If it belongs to you, it will not go missing from 7B. If it goes missing from 7B, it was not yours. It was the sort of sentence that makes you angry for exactly 1 second and then makes a second part of you stop and sit down. I don't know which part won. I slid the note into my pocket because I couldn't think how to leave it and not think about it. The dryer rolled to life with my quarters. Heat moved through the drum like a patient weather front. The smell of warm cotton climbed into the room and made it feel like a Sunday morning. I sat again. The night sat too. Alder Street outside was empty. A single car passed with a sound like a plan changing. When the bell over the door rang the second time, a woman walked in. She was mid-30s, maybe a quiet 40, with the kind of posture that says she teaches children or keeps bees. Her coat was the old kind, wool with a belt, the collar turned up not for fashion, but because wind is a fact. She carried a laundry bag sewn from a flour sack, the logo sun-faded and soft. "Evening," she said, like it really was evening, and not a lost hour in the middle of the night. "Hey," I said, and felt suddenly like I'd borrowed the room and she had brought it back to itself. She chose a machine without hesitation. 7A. Her hands were quick and unshowy. She loaded the clothes like she knew which fabric liked which space. When she reached for the coin slot, she paused, then tapped her fingers lightly against the out-of-order strip on 7B, the way people touch a railing when they use the stairs they've used all their lives. I don't know why I spoke. Maybe because the room had changed temperature, the way it does when someone opens a door across the house. "They say not to use it," I said, nodding at 7B, as if the rule hadn't been printed in 2 different places and phrased like a kindergarten teacher asking nicely. "They do," she said, and smiled as if the word "they" included her and excluded her at once. She fed quarters into 7A. The machine swallowed them with tidy appetite. "Some people listen." "Do you work here?" "No one works here past midnight," she said, and from anyone else it would have sounded like a warning or a boast, but from her it sounded like weather. She lifted the lid on the soap hopper and made a little face at the residue. "I bring my own." I wanted to ask what 7B did, what had happened, why the sign was newer and the card older, and why the note in my pocket knew which machine to warn me about. I wanted a clean sentence like, "Oh, there was a flood," or "a motor burned," or "it's only for blankets," or "Jim never came." But the woman did not look like someone who would hand you a tidy story just because your head had made space for one. "Do you ever get the feeling a place is doing you a favor you didn't ask for?" she said, more to the measuring cup in her hand than to me. "I think that about libraries," I said, "and elevators sometimes." She nodded, satisfied that the idea had somewhere to live, and poured the soap. "Dryers are worse," she said. "They hold on." The light above the counter flickered once and steadied. The plant near the window looked braver. My dryer pitched a dull thump that made me think of a sneaker someone had forgotten to untie. I didn't ask about 7B. She didn't offer. We sat with the machines. There is a point, late at night in a bright room, when time feels like a tray you can set down. That point came and went and left a small ring on the table like a water glass does. My dryer trilled its done song. She was reading a pamphlet about carpet cleaning that she had not picked up. When I stood to fold, the coin changer coughed a quarter onto the floor and it rolled toward my foot in a way that felt like a decision. I picked it up. It was old, one of the state quarters from the year they tried to make us collect our own country. On the back, The outline was worn smooth, where fingers must have worried it in pockets. I don't know when the man came in. 1 minute it was just our quiet, the next the door was closing with that spoon-on-glass ring, and he was already at the changes feeding a crumpled bill that went in with reluctance and came out as a column of quarters like a little armoured army. He was 60, give or take a decade. He had hair that had decided about grey and a jaw that had decided about nothing. His coat belonged to a different winter. He carried a backpack that looked new enough to be on a gift receipt. When he glanced at me, his eyebrows said apology before his mouth could. "Which one eats the least?" he asked. "Not 7, I said. "Any of the others?" I was trying to be funny. It arrived as seriousness. "Not 7, he echoed. He turned to the rows. He stood with the weight on his heels, the way people do when they are testing a floor they have walked before. He put his bag down in front of 7B. "Sorry," I said. "That one's out." He ran his knuckles gently along the out-of-order strip, not to remove it, but to feel the raised lettering through the plastic. He nodded, as if something had been confirmed that he had guessed at. Then he slid 2 quarters into the coin slot anyway. They did not disappear. The machine did not take them. They stood in the mouth of the slot, reluctant coins in a reluctant machine. He did not look at me or the woman. He put his palm against the glass of the door. The machine shuddered once, like a sleeper deciding whether to wake. The out-of-order strip peeled at one corner, then lay back down like a dog that wanted to stand and decided against it. He pressed his mouth to the metal rim of the porthole and said something I could not hear. Not because he whispered, but because whatever he said did not live in the part of the air I could use. The woman set her measuring cup down. "Sir," she said, in the voice people use when they are about to be kind and might need to be firmer than they like. "Please don't." He stood up. His hand left a fog print on the glass that did not fade. He reached for the handle. He pulled. The door would not open. The latch did not move. He looked at the 2 coins, still balanced in the slot like the beginning of a trick. "It has my shirt," he said. "It was my father's." "It doesn't have anything," I said, which was true in the way facts are true and false, in the way stories are true. He put in 2 more quarters. They balanced perfectly on the first 2. The slot held $4 worth of stubborn. The woman stood, slow, nothing dramatic. She walked the length of the row and rested her fingers on the lamination of the rules. "Do not use machine 7B, she read, as if from a prayer book. "If it belongs to you, it won't go missing from 7B. My hand went to my pocket before I could stop it. The note there felt warm, as if laundry heat could pass through paper. He laughed once, a sound with no humor. "It doesn't belong to me," he said, and in those words there was the loaded way people talk about inheritance and marriage and luck. He took his hand off the door and put it back again. The fog print overlapped and became wings. The first coin slid inward by the thickness of a breath. The second followed, then the third, then the fourth. The machine made a sound like a swallowed cough. My dryer, kind, ordinary, mine, clicked its drum as if reminding us all of a better way to live. "Sir," the woman said again, and then turned to me. "Would you mind starting another dryer for me?" she asked, and handed me 2 quarters and a small folded towel that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and clean basements. Her eyes said, "Now, not later." I did as she asked. I walked to the far end of the room, away from the row with the 7s, and chose a dryer I could not see from where they stood. I fed the quarters. I put in the towel. I closed the door and pressed start, and the machine did its good, normal, responsible work. When I turned back, the man had both hands on 7B, as if he could pry the door with wanting. The out-of-order strip had bubbles now, little blisters across the letters. The corkboard at the back of the room made a small noise like paper settling, and a flyer slipped its pin and fell to the floor face down, which should not have felt like anything and felt like Wednesday. "Jim," the man said, to no one I could see. The coin slot accepted a 5th quarter. It should not have. The slot was full. The out-of-order strip lifted and stayed lifted, lazy. The machine hummed, not like a motor, like a throat. The woman stepped forward and laid her palm flat against the glass of 7A, the machine she'd chosen. Her cycle continued like honest weather. "Ask it nicely," she said to the man without sarcasm. "For what is yours?" He closed his eyes. He said the kind of please that comes only when a person is keeping themselves from a story they have told about who they are. The machine quieted. The fog on the glass cleared at the size and shape of a book. I realized I had been wrong. Not wings, pages. The door of 7B did not open, but the door of 7A did, though no one had touched it. The woman's clothes were fine. They had learned her name and would not leave without being asked. On the floor inside 7A, there lay a shirt. White, Oxford cloth. The collar soft with years. A thin stripe of blue that had almost forgotten it was blue. The buttons did not match. One had been replaced by hand with a different white, the kind of fix someone does with bad light and good love. The man made a sound that was less like relief and more like recognition through grief. He picked up the shirt like it had been sleeping, and he did not want to wake it. He did not cry. He had cried earlier in a different year and decided to save now for folding. "Thank you," he said. To the woman, to the machine, to the room, to the kind of world where sometimes things are moved from one place to another without being lost. He did not pay for 7A. The quarters in 7B had paid for whatever 7A had done. He left without washing anything else. The bell over the door rang twice, like a little applause. The out-of-order strip settled back into itself with the exhausted dignity of tape that has worked too hard. The fog on the glass of 7B disappeared all at once, as if someone had wiped it with the flat of a dry palm. The coins did not return. The woman closed the door of 7A, started her cycle again, and then looked at me with the expression of someone who was taught a lesson by accident. "Some people listen," she said again, not unkindly. "Does it always give things back?" I asked. "No," she said. "It only gives things where they belong. It will not give you a version you prefer." "My dryer is done," I said, which was true and not, and she smiled like I had passed the class in How We Talk About Loss. We folded in the quiet. Folding is good work, the kind you can succeed at with attention and patience. My hands remembered shirts the way my mother taught me. Sleeves behind, 3 folds, stack with the cuff toward you so the edge you see is neat. I rolled socks into pairs only when I was sure they wanted to be together. I do not know how you can tell. You can tell. When I reached the bottom of my basket, there was a shirt that was not mine. It was a T-shirt, black, soft, as if it had been kept for sleeping. Across the front in pale letters it said, "City Champs, 2003, and below that, in smaller print, Lincoln High. I have never been to Lincoln High. The hem had been mended unevenly, the kind of job you do in a hurry at a kitchen table. There was a stain near the shoulder, the shape of a thumbprint in rust. I looked at the washers, at the dryers, at 7B with its sulk and its rules. I turned the shirt inside out, which is how you look for names, but also how you show a thing you are not trying to steal it. There was no name, only a white tag gone grey with washings and a size that was not mine. I carried it to the counter, the place where an attendant would be if any attended. There was a bell there too, not like the one on the door, this one lower, a plunk like a small brass bowl struck with a ring. Beneath the bell sat a spiral notebook turned to a page that said "Lost and Found" at the top in precise capital letters. Names and numbers followed, and under each a description: 1 sock, purple, stars, blanket, baby, yellow edge, book, Spanish, saints. I wrote shirt, black, Lincoln High, 2003, and left my number because that felt like part of how the world should work, even if the world often forgets to work that way. When I put the pen down, something fluttered beneath the page. A carbon copy, blue, that had not been used in years but still wanted to. Under my writing, faint, there appeared the neat block capital letters again, precisely over mine, as if the paper had decided to agree with me in its own hand. There was a slot beside the counter labelled "Drop Lost Items Here." It was barely wide enough for the shirt, but it accepted it with gratitude. And then there was a sound, like the gentle slide of something soft down a chute. A moment later, in the floor behind 7B, I heard a small thud that was not a coincidence. The woman's machine sang its finished song. She lifted out clothes that looked like they had been chosen for a life that would treat them kindly. She folded with the economy of someone who can plan a week with a drawer. When she finished, she set one small thing aside, a child's sock, green, with a yellow stripe, and placed it on top of the dryer like a votive. "For who?" I asked. "For whatever the machines want to remember," she said, and in that answer there was the quiet of somebody who has learned how not to argue with gravity. "What happens if someone uses it?" I said, nodding at 7B, using the kind of it you use when you mean a problem. "They don't," she said. "Mostly." She did not look at the door where the man had gone. "Sometimes the room makes a mistake and lets one in who has a debt. Sometimes the debt calls back a thing that never belonged to them. 7B was made to hold that, to give the room time to think, or to keep a person from deciding too fast that they were owed. That's a lot of work for a machine." She smiled. "People say laundromats are for washing clothes. They are also for washing decisions. They're like libraries or waiting rooms. You bring what you've used to the place where time is patient and try again." My phone lit with a notification and then went dark before I could read it. The kind of phantom alert that reminds you the world is not always making contact, even when it says it is. A car idled outside. The bell did not ring. The headlights made a smear on the glass that looked like a page half erased. "Do you live nearby?" I asked, which was none of my business and all of my curiosity. "Everyone lives nearby at this hour," she said, without being unkind. She lifted her basket. It was lighter than it had been in a way that had nothing to do with shirts. On her way to the door, she pressed her fingers briefly to the out-of-order strip on 7B, the way some people touch the statue at the end of a hallway or the forehead of a child on their way out of the house. The tape did not stick to her, and her hand did not stick to the tape. She left, and the bell said the polite farewell of brass. I stayed to finish folding because leaving a mess in a place that has rules felt like asking for the wrong kind of attention. When I slid my last pair of jeans into the basket, the coin changer coughed again and dropped a quarter onto the floor. This time, it did not roll. It lay heads up, not one of the state quarters. Regular, eagle, United States of America in solemn curve. I picked it up and looked at the year. 2003, the same year as the shirt. That is not interesting until it is. I put the quarter in my pocket and walked to the corkboard. The flyer that had fallen lay face down, as if shy. I turned it over. The edges were scalloped as if cut by craft scissors. In the center, under a clip art shirt, someone had written, "If this is yours, you'll know which machine can find it." There was a phone number. Not Jim's. A different one with a neighborhood exchange. I took a photo and then felt foolish and tore off one of the little tabs at the bottom. On my way out, I stopped by 7B. The coin slot was empty. My mind told me so with the authority of things we are sure we saw. And yet, when I put my finger inside, I felt the cold of stacked edges and the brief pulse of something like the faintest electric. Not a shock, a reminder. The glass reflected me the way glass does, unforgiving, exact, slightly kinder in fluorescent light. For a moment, for the length of time it takes to decide not to touch a hot pan, even though you want to know, my reflection doubled. Not in the simple way a double pane makes a ghost. This was a person over my shoulder who looked like me, old enough to know better. I said, "I'm not missing anything." I meant it as a ward, and as a hope, and as a piece of good behavior offered in exchange for being allowed to keep going. The person over my shoulder did not nod. They did not frown. They waited long enough to hear if I meant it, and then were only me again. I locked my car when I got in. I do that even when I know it doesn't matter. The laundromat light hummed behind me like a song that does not mind if you leave mid-chorus because it knows the chorus will come around again. At home, I put clothes away with a care that felt like penance. I found spaces for shirts that had not had spaces. I let go of 2 things I had kept out of habit. I put the 2003 quarter in my junk drawer and immediately knew it did not belong there. I moved it to the bowl where I keep keys, and then to my wallet, and then back to the bowl. It ended up on my dresser because it wanted to see the room. I slept. I dreamt of a room full of glass circles that opened and closed like eyes in a storm. I woke with the taste of coin metal under my tongue and the knowledge that I had not set a timer on my dryer, and yet nothing had burned. 2 days later, a text arrived from a number I did not know. "Do you still have the Lincoln shirt?" I had forgotten the tab in my pocket. I had not forgotten the shirt, which the room had not let me keep. I wrote back, dropped it at Alder. A minute later, "Thank you." Then, I was supposed to let it go. I needed to be made to. There are sentences that deserve answers and sentences that are their own answer. I sent a thumbs up because I am a coward and a stranger, and because thumb ups are sometimes the most honest way to stand slightly aside from a person's real revelation and let it be theirs. That night, my building's dryer thumped itself brave again, the belt deciding to behave on a Tuesday that finally arrived. I did my laundry at home because it was raining and because the parts of me that get curious had been fed and needed rest. I folded on my bed and watched a show with a laugh track, because sometimes you need the sound of people being told when to be amused. Around midnight, the lights blinked. Not out. Just the way they blink when the grid gives the building a little shrug. My phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. If it doesn't belong to me, it will go missing from 7B. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred and the message could have been any of the others. I wrote back, "Who is this?" and got no answer. The next morning, I walked to Alder to ask the attendant a question I had not drafted well. A boy was there I'd never seen, high school age, earbuds in, eyes on a video, pushing a mop with the bored precision of a person who works for an older cousin who gives them cash. I asked if Jim was around. He shrugged like a tide. "Jim's not mornings," he said. "Is there a lost and found?" "Behind the counter," he said, and did not move to fetch it, and I did not ask him to, because there are rules, and one of them is that you do not make a young person perform a duty they have not been told is theirs. I looked at 7B. The out-of-order strip was gone. In its place, Scotch tape held a handwritten sign that said, "Closed in thick black letters," which is not the same as broken and not the same as forbidden, and exactly the same as saying a door is a door. "Did someone fix that one?" I asked. He looked up from his video, annoyed by responsibility. "It's not for people," he said. "It's a washer," I said, gently. He considered whether it was worth it to correct me. It was. "It's not for people," he repeated, louder, slower, like maybe I was the laundromat's non-English speaking tourist. A woman came in carrying a baby in a wrap and a bag of clothes that was too heavy for her shoulder. The boy was saved by the bell and by the social expectation of the next thing that needed doing. I stood by 7B and felt dumb in the way you feel when you try to touch a dream with words. That evening, I went back with a pillowcase that had lost its partner and a t-shirt I had packed in anger 3 apartments ago and never worn since. I did not put them in 7B. I put them in the drop lost items here slot and walked to the back and waited until I felt the little soft thud in the floor. When I left, I pressed my fingers against the glass of 7B. It was cool. For the length of a breath, it was warmer than my fingers and then cool again, like a thing that had decided to meet me exactly halfway and no farther. I walked home with empty hands and did not feel like I had lost. A week later, I got a call from Jim. His voice was younger than his name. He said he'd found my note in the book and would I mind describing the shirt again. I told him, and he said, "It's with its person." And then, after a pause, Thank you for letting it be. I said, of course, because that's the kind of sentence you say when you are trying to be the person who deserves to be thanked for something the room did. On the first truly warm night of spring, Alder Wash and Dry had the door propped open with a cinder block, and the plant by the window had put out one determined new leaf. A man I had never seen sat on a stool by the counter with a chessboard open and no opponent, playing both sides patiently, letting white and black make each other better. He looked up when I came in and nodded, then moved a knight like a person packing a suitcase for a life he was still deciding to take. I chose 5A out of superstition, and because it has never lied to me. When I poured the soap, the measuring cup overflowed a little, and I licked the foam from my finger like a child to keep from dripping on the floor, and laughed at myself when I remembered what soap was meant to do. The machine drank. The drum turned. A pair of socks stuck together in the washer window and tried to become one thing. The drum spun them apart. They found each other again. Sometimes it works like that. Halfway through the cycle, the lights blinked. A shrug from the grid. The coin changer coughed 1 quarter. It rolled toward me, bumped my shoe, and stopped. I picked it up and did not check the year. I put it on the edge of 7B's door like an offering to a deity I do not worship, but will happily greet on its holiday. When I finished and was loading the dryer, the door rang twice in the way it does for hello, and then for wait. The woman with the wool coat walked in, wearing no coat because the world had given us back a temperature where you can be brave. She placed a folded child's sock, green with a yellow stripe, on 7B's handle, and then moved it to the top of 7A, as if remembering which machine likes what. Evening, she said, and it was evening, not night, not morning, not any strange hour. Do some things ever stay lost? I asked, which was the wrong question and the right one. She tilted her head. They stay elsewhere, she said, which is not the same as lost. I nodded like I understood. Maybe I did. The chess player made a sound with his tongue, the way people do when they see a move that only he had seen. The plant put out another leaf. When I left, I pressed my fingers against 7B one more time. The glass was cool. It stayed cool. I said, "Thank you," because that is not a bad habit to have, and the machine did not answer, because sometimes the right response is to let a person think they are talking to themselves. On Alder Street, a bus passed, sighing. The church door was open. You could see the folding chairs, patient as ever. The bakery had put a sign in the window that said, "Tuesday rolls in chalk," and underlined it twice. The tailor shop next door to the laundromat had a suit in the window with a note pinned to the lapel. Ready at last. I walked home, carrying the weight of clean cotton and something else you cannot fold. In the bowl on my dresser, the 2003 lay where I had left it, heads up, the eagle considering whether flight is a decision. Beside it, on its own, a second quarter I had not placed there, tails up, stateside worn smooth, as if an old year had arrived to keep a new one company. I did not move either. I turned off the light. Sometimes, late, I hear the thump of the building dryer settle into a more honest rhythm, as if it had lied to itself about how loud it needed to be. Sometimes the notification on my phone that isn't a notification flashes, and I do not reach for it. Sometimes I dream of rooms where decisions go to be washed and come back less angry. If you find yourself on Alder Street after midnight, and if you have something that keeps being almost yours and then isn't, you can take it to the laundromat with the wrong neon name. Don't force 7B. Don't feed it money like a problem. Leave what isn't yours where machines think together. Fold what returns. Learn the rules and then abide by them like someone who has lived in a household with a windy door. If you drop a sock, pick it up. And if the bell rings when no one comes in, look at the plant near the window. If it is braver, it's because the room remembered you kept a promise and wants to see what else you might keep. I still go there, even though my dryer works. I bring coins that have worried pockets and leave them in the tray for the next person who thought they didn't have enough. I touch the glass of 7B, not as a challenge, but as a greeting. Some machines hold back our worst guesses long enough for a better one to arrive. Some rooms give us our own things back only when we have stopped asking for the version we wanted. If you see a shirt that is not yours in the bottom of your basket, you might be careful how quickly you decide whose it will be next. If it belongs to you, it will not go missing from 7B. If it goes missing from 7B, it was not yours. And if you cannot tell the difference yet, there is always another cycle. Hey friends, that's where we'll leave the lights tonight. If you're still with me, thanks for wandering through the quiet with me. The archive that keeps its own counsel, the library below the maps, the motel that remembers our reflections, the rest stop that doesn't trust the clock, and the Alder Street laundromat where machines wash more than shirts. Different places, same small lesson. Walk kindly, mind the rules that feel like they were written just for you, and only carry what's truly yours. If you're listening while you're drifting off, let the rest of the night do the traveling. Your blankets know the way back. If you're studying or building or mining little squares somewhere in the background, leave the torches where you'll find them again. There's time. I'm glad you were here. If any of tonight's stories kept you company, you're always welcome back to this corner of the internet. Tell me which place you liked best, or the rule you'd trust if you found it taped to a door at 2 a.m. And if you don't have words right now, that's okay. Silence is a kind of answer too. Hydrate, unclench your jaw, check your pockets for that 1/4 that keeps following you around. Then let the room you're in approve of you, the way good rooms do, and give yourself permission to power down. This is SpiderFish, wishing you a steady night and an easy morning. Sleep well. Keep the gentle rules. I'll see you next time.